All right, guys, I got a really special guest coming back in, and I've been excited to do this one. So, I've had the fortunate ability, I guess, in my career to maybe help some folks, maybe not help some folks, maybe drive some folks crazy. I think this gentleman I've got with me has been in all three of those categories in any given week. So, I got Alex Englehart coming in live from Denver, Colorado. Alex, how you been, dude? Long time no chat, and what's new in the hood, man? How you been?
Shaun, it's been a long time. I think the last time we chatted, you sent me a text message and said, Alex, if you let these plants die, your business is going to die. So
That sounds like something I forgot. How are the plants doing? So, I
that
guess to
stuck
give
with me. That stuck with me.
I guess to give context to the guests out there, Alex is also someone that was living in the same condo like Kayla Dillon and I, another guest that's been on. And during that time of the pandemic, boy, did we not all just really bond together. Anyone that was an entrepreneur trying to figure some stuff out. So Alex is someone that was in my gym classes at the time, and I think we got to know each other. So let's ask the important question: are the plants still living? I think I've seen from Instagram it looks like they're thriving, not just living.
The plants are doing well. All the plants are doing well. The yucca was close. Yucca pulled through. Still got the bamboo tree, which is doing wonderful, and I got the cactus that I'm looking at right here. And I think it was, such a monumental thing, and the way that you said it made me never forget it. I'll be an 80-year-old man and I'll still remember that. But you looked at me dead in the eye and you said, Alex, the day that you allow your plants to die is the day that your business is going to suffer.
And what did you take away from that? Because I'm glad that resonated with you, because that wasn't just necessarily a funny thing I was saying. Like, what was your takeaway from that meaning that I had in that moment?
Yeah, the biggest impact those words had was if you get off your track and if you get off your mindset and you stop doing the little things, then all of the big things start to fall apart. And I think it's such a crucial thing that we're going to talk about today, just from going from what's called a survival mode into a thrival mode, a mode of thriving, which I'm really excited to share with you guys.
I'm excited to hear about that too, man. And I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think that's often in life, it's easy to build in filters. And what I would say is, I think a lot of folks have built in pretty good filters into the life without realizing it. I would argue in the Western culture that we have today, a lot of people have built in filters, keeping a lot of good out, and they don't realize that either. One of the things that got me into, like, I would say botany a little bit more, or really caring for plants is, and I think you and I were talking about this, the chaos in business, the chaos in the adventure sports that I'm in. There's something just so tranquil and stoic about, taking care of something that can't speak back, but also a great identifier for when you're off your base, because plants can't speak, but they'll definitely show you. Like, if I'm out of my routine, I've got to water the plants, and it's a little bit of a subtle thing. So I'm glad you had a good takeaway from there. So talk to me about, when you and I first got together, Alex. I know you are starting a company called Cap Culture. I think I gave you a little bit of final motivation to get that going. I know you learned a lot from there, but kind of fill me in on that process. What did Cap Culture look like for you, and how did that kind of all play out? And what did you learn, I guess, most importantly?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cap Culture was a custom apparel company, and we were on a mission to inspire people to live a life that they love through apparel. At the end of the day, I was really excited to bring this to the world because I'm so passionate about living the best life that you can possibly live. And I had a really deep understanding of how the apparel market worked. And I wanted to inspire people to get back to realizing that it's those little things in life, like playing sports or going to a concert or going on a hike, that really bring out the best in you. And without those passions, you're unable to really live a life that you love. So Cap Culture kicked off back in, beginning of February of 2021. So it's been a little over 2 years now, and it kicked off in such a bright way. We threw a launch party in Denver, Colorado. We ended up grossing about $10,000 in sales the first day. The three original goals that I made for the company were to partner with my favorite musician, were to partner with 2 Chainz' old tour manager, Charlie Rocket, and have a dreamer release, and then to partner with just a well-known influencer and make sure that went well. And after the first 6 months that the company was open, I was able to accomplish all those goals. For somehow, some way, it was amazing. I reached out to my favorite musician, and he wanted to do a collaboration. All of a sudden, we were flying out to LA, and we were meeting with the Dreamers and Charlie Rocket, and we did this big hat collaboration, which was really, really good for us. And then, thankfully, through some mutual friends in Laguna Beach, California, I got tied up with the DiCaprio family, and we actually just did an order for them for them recently, but since then it's really been an adventure. We had all this momentum at first and things were going really, really well, and then we kind of peaked a little bit. I feel like I got past that stage where you're selling to friends, you're selling to family, you're selling to people in your immediate community, and then it's so important to find the next bridge that's going to get you to scale into the general public, get you to scale, start the state, get you to scale to people across the country. So I hit this speed bump, um, and it was really, really tough to deal with. And it started to get me off my rocker, and the plants started to get a little brown.
It started to
And
filter. Can I ask? Can I interject in there too, Alex? Because I have a lot of information for context, but again, like I really some of the points of taking chances are to also encourage other folks when they're going through this. When you started that business, and you don't have to say the concept, but you had a full time career still, right? For pretty much this full endeavor up until recently. Is that fair? Is that true?
that's
What I'm saying?
that's correct. Yeah, when I originally kicked off Cap Culture, I was still working full time in the apparel industry.
And so how are you? How was it at first? And look, I know you're just a guy that exudes passion, right? And I think that if I had to quantify anything that I was trying to help you with, is kind of to format and structure and point that passion in the right direction to where it can be monetized, but I think that passion just exudes you. And that's a hard thing that's a hard thing to stop. And I'm not saying that it should be stopped, but I think once you kind of have that natural inertia, it's going to carry you through. But what I'm really curious about too is, a lot of folks that we have on as well struggle during those times. And, any entrepreneur that I'm coaching, especially if they have a career, which almost 100% of them do, it's not going to be easy at the start. No one fucking said it's going to be easy. No one said it's going to be, just all rainbows and butterflies. There's definitely a lot of hardships there. But talk to me about some of those challenges, because I know you're someone that puts the best foot forward, Alex, because I also know that you want to motivate other people, but I also know that you've got a really good discipline set to kind of deal with some of those stresses. And I would imagine being in the first business, going through the career, going through some of the transitions I know you were like, so what were some of the things, what were some of the takeaways? Like, how did you stay disciplined? And then tell me how the story plays out. But I'm really curious about the emotional roller coaster, if there was one, when you were going through those.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the first word that came to mind, Sean, was discipline. When you're working a full-time job and you have to spend those 3 hours, those 4 hours after you get off work on a Monday through Friday, and then you're saying no to your friends on the weekends and you're having to skip out on things that you really love to do to get a business off the ground, it is one of the hardest things you can possibly imagine. Not only is 5 o'clock hit and you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're like, man, I'm tired. I could use a little nap right now. I'm trying to go to the gym, and you got to work 3, 4 hours on a business. It takes so much discipline. It takes an immense amount of effort. And that was certainly a roller coaster. But I think there's such beauty in that too, especially when you're starting something new and you have this idea and you start working on it and you start hitting those milestones, like developing a new product, getting your email marketing set up, working with somebody to build your website. You're having meetings with friends. You're bringing on, different partnerships, and things are starting to progress and trend in that direction. I kind of call it the honeymoon phase, where it's exciting because you get off work from your day job and you're like, wow, I can pour my passion and my energy into something that I really, really care about and that's meaningful to me.
Well,
So
I think that's
one of the biggest,
go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
so one of the biggest challenges that I faced within getting that business was really starting to get clear on where I should divide my time.
Okay.
So in the mornings, when I'm in flow state, I just wake up, it's 5 a.m., I'm going to the gym, I'm trying to put a couple hours in on my business before I start my day job while the ideas are fresh and bright. And that is such a hard thing to maintain at such a high level. And with Cap Culture, for example, one of my biggest challenges was, okay, this thing's starting to make a little bit of money. We have some sales coming in, and it was tough to decide when it was okay to cut the cord from my current career.
Okay, I got you. So, I think we talked about this a little bit too, but did you identify any key performance indicators of what that number was? Because that's one of the first baselines of really, and I don't think we had these conversations of really diving into the A to B as much, And I think if you've got the A to B connected, a couple things you said that are great. Number one, for what Alex is saying, it's very difficult, near fucking impossible. If you're not passionate about whatever X is you're trying to start, you're not going to take the right actions because, to Alex's point, you're going to be tired. You're going to be stressed. It's going to be this. Alex, I would assume that, I know you probably had a few challenging days, but I would also guess that it probably never felt like work because of how passionate you were about that company.
That's
Is
accurate.
that a fair one? And I mean, so it's like one of those things of like, man, I'm gonna get punched today, or like, similar to going to training. Like, there's definitely days, and I tell my fiance this all the time. I don't have training. There's definitely most days I don't love training. I mean, I love what 5 seconds after I'm in that door and I got going. But there's not a lot of days where I'm like super excited to go run, especially after a torn ACL. So I think, I think you said a lot of good things there, but I think that that passion helped pull you through. So now you got cap culture going on. You're trying to figure out when to leave the corporate career. When did you make that jump?
That's right. Yeah. So I ended up, doing a couple different things since we last talked, Sean. So when cap culture hit that initial speed bump, it was still profitable. The online sales were going, and I felt like I never decided on that number. Just getting back to that previous point you had, what is that key performance indicator or that number that is going to allow you to make that jump? And I'll be completely honest when I say this. If you're somebody that is planning on making $10,000 a month right off of the gate with a new business that you have, it's nearly impossible to sustain that. I mean, there's overnight successes and it depends on the scale that you want to have within that company, but I'm talking about profit in your pocket, keeping that money at home.
I think it depends on kind of business too, Alex. And the first thing
Sure.
I'd push back on you in that is you launched into a product business, and a product business is retail is one of the toughest verticals. We talked a ton about this. And I think when we talked a ton about that, I think at the time you were in your corporate career for so long and you're like, fuck this guy. I make hats. I'm going to make hats. There's tough for the margins. And look, something similar with Feihu. When I exited Feihu was a 7-figure company that every other month, regardless of if you're successful or not, and it depends on how many investors you want to work with, how much capital you want to carry in liability. In a product business, 80% of your revenue needs to go back into product development or you're a fucking idiot and you will not be in business. So I think that, to your point, if you're in a product business, to earn income right away, maybe not so much. And the reason I say that, Alex, is I've got over 45 solopreneurs going that have in the first month broken over 15,000, and it's all profit. Now the difference is their product is really their skill set, so it's completely different. But just to throw that out there for everyone, because I think, and I know a lot of what's going on, Alex, I just wanted to come out and hear. I know cap culture, and then we'll get to your questions here. Cap culture has pivoted a little bit into more of what your passion was. Am I on? Are you still doing that, or am I off base a little?
You're off base a little bit, Sean. But going back to that KPI for me personally, I wish I would have drawn a number just in the sand and been like, okay, this is a number that is crucial for me to survive. I don't need a ton, but this is the number that's going to pay my rent, that's going to keep me happy, that's going to keep me, off the streets, so to speak, and moving in the right direction. And I think it's such a crucial thing when you're starting a business is defining the lifestyle that you really want to live and the lifestyle that you want to have. So for me at the time when I was starting to turn a little bit of a profit, I decided to go back into the corporate world and actually get a new job to learn some new skills about tech and about marketing. So that's currently where I'm at the moment. And I decided to keep cap culture alive and pivot the entire business model and go from retail and more into a B2B wholesale route. So now we only do large custom orders for other businesses.
Oh, that's great. So talk to me about that. Yeah, because if you go back, and I love this, and thank God for editing, because we'll be able to edit part of this out as well. But talk to me, because the last text that you sent me, the last time that we spoke about this, you were pivoting out of cap culture, and I thought going into kind of like a web-based community hub, which to me, when I read that, I was like, oh, great for Alex. He's literally used a product business to get right into his passion. And you sent me a couple websites over. Is that still
Yeah.
happening, or is that kind of combined into one?
No, it is. And this is what I'm so excited about now, Sean. So I pivoted cap culture and I found out, okay, I'm spending so much of my time going to these events. I'm spending so much of my time marketing on my Shopify site. I'm spending a lot of time and I really wasn't getting that much reward. So I figured out the highest profitable possible gross that was worth my time was doing these wholesale, larger bulk apparel orders, where I reach out to a business and they're going to place a $20,000 order for a large volume of apparel. I ship that to my network that I built with my decorators, and immediately I'm spending about 3 hours of my time and I'm profiting $5,000 or $6,000. So within that, I found a way
What are
to
your
utilize.
margins? If you don't mind me asking, Alex, because like numbers don't mean as much, but like what do your margins look like for there? Because I would assume mostly going at wholesale, your margins are probably smaller, but again, they're essentially funding the product purchases, correct? I mean, so you're developing it. Once you get a purchase order in, okay, time to go, and there's a turnaround, and you're getting a nominal fee. Do you know those margins off the top of your head? Because I think that's super smart what you did, man. You had a home run win. You pivoted into more to a B2B model, but I'm just curious about what the liquidity looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't broker any sort of deal if my margin wasn't at least 30%. And that was me spending minimal amount of time and offloading 100% of the work. The only thing that I would be doing at the time would be sending a couple proofs, making a couple phone calls, collecting payment, closing the deal, going to the post office, that easy.
And I'm sure your margins were closer to 45 to 50% in cap culture B2C, but you're probably spending 15 to 30 of that in marketing and then the resource times as well. So at the end of the day, that raw number doesn't really mean dick. It was just, it wasn't feasible to sustain.
Exactly. Yeah, not only was that not sustainable, but I also found out that my passion with cap culture and opening the door, like for me as an entrepreneur, what I want to do, Sean, is I want to create value to the world. I want to make a difference and I want to help my community around me. I'm not necessarily in it for the money. Sure, I want to live a comfortable life, and I think it's a byproduct of your why and your reasoning. But for me, the biggest reason why I wanted to be an entrepreneur is to make an impact, to really make an impact and make the world a better place than I found it. So ultimately, I figured out that people weren't so passionate about following their passions, which was the mission of cap culture. So what's a way that I can still help people out, make a profit, and then create a new community that is more in line with my personal values and goals, which I'm sure we'll dive into here in a bit.
Yeah, talk to me about that. I mean, just talk to me about the transition because again, at the end of the day, like transitioning from surviving, this is the story. Like, I don't have to ask you rudimentary questions. What people need to hear about are actual fucking stories of people that are not too afraid to talk about what happens behind the closed doors, to the emotional constraints that come down. And Alex, you've known me for a long time, and I think you know me as probably one of the most direct humans that have ever been on the planet. And what I can tell you is, post that surgery, I became a very, very, very dangerous human because all that's really changed for me too is I've allowed myself even less excuses about living any different than the man I know I'm supposed to be. And I would assume in this conversation for you transitioning there, so talk to me about what that pivot looked like. So you pivoted, cap culture is still going on. What is the secondary community-based company that you've got going as well?
Sure. Yeah. So that pivot was really hard, going away from the whole B2C business model. I felt like it was my baby, and it was one of the first companies that I really poured a lot of capital into. So letting that go, I felt like I was killing a part of myself, but I knew that there was something that was more in line with my mission that was going to have a bigger impact on the world, right? So after pivoting the cap culture business model, really slowing it down, not doing as much outreach, but still using it as, a revenue and income stream, I got back to the drawing board, and I noticed, kind of like what you said, I was killing a little bit of my soul and my passion because my heart was really no longer in the cap culture business because I wasn't seeing people have the biggest impact from it. People were buying the hats and they'd put them on and they'd think they look cool, but there was never, somebody who put the hat on and was like, wow, like this is inspiring me to want to go to the gym or live my best life. So for me personally, since then, I got back to my roots. I got my health coaching certification, and then I started partnering with a lot of people in community. And recently, I've been working on a project with different um, doctors, neuroscientists, NDs, nutritionists, and fitness coaches to create a 21-day transformational challenge that is the highest quality coaching um, really platform that can exist to bring you from point A to point B. I
Okay.
believe like in the new kind of world that we're all segueing into now, the rise of the solopreneur and kind of in this new economy that we live in, the number one difference between what happens now and what used to happen is personalization. There's so many things out there. There's so much information, Sean. I saw a post that you posted the other day. Like if you scroll on LinkedIn and you see all these people who are influencers and they're posting every single day, a lot of their content is absolute garbage. It's sad. Like, how many times have you seen people post, these are the best prompts to use ChatGPT, and they're all the exact same, and they just copy off of each other, and it's
Well,
garbage.
it's an interesting thing too, Alex, and like I can definitely tell you that, and this isn't the time for all this conversation. I'm the same human, but I'm a completely different person. The glasses, because you've got to realize, I'm now 2 years and 4 months outside of the United States, living in 71 different countries, exposing myself to a bunch of different cultures. There's a whole bunch of conversations I can't wait to have with you at the right time. But I would say I am proud to see kind of where this has evolved. And let me just give you on a complete, again, because I look at you as someone as I've coached before too, as a complete just kind of proud moment of a conversation. I, to this day, never understood cap culture. I've said this to you in person. I've said this to you out loud. I think it's what is super fucking awesome to me is I think that through you exploring and trying a business, just like a lot of things I start, like, and so many people are like, what happens if it doesn't go right? It's probably not going to. You're probably going to figure out what it is you're really trying to do from doing this. Interesting thing with taking chances. I will never stop taking chances. I've talked to you. We've got a couple other podcasts coming out. And this might resonate with you, Alex. Everyone wanted me to do a specific niche. And I understand why they wanted me to now, because I'm not Joe Rogan yet. But to go broad, I just had to practice doing this a bit, and I got super passionate about it. After doing 10 episodes, I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense now. So we've got a bunch of special ones out. But if I never took a chance and didn't start doing this and never practiced, just like you and I go through training, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not a basketball player, but I can choke people out. Maybe I can't throw a baseball, but I can definitely climb a mountain. And I think there's different tricks for everyone out there. And for me, my takeaway is just from hearing you having the courage to explore this when you were super busy, the world was, because let's be honest, Alex started a business when the world was closing. And this is just full transparency, everything's shutting down, retail shutting down, the world is closing around, the sky is falling. It wasn't, we all knew that. But at the end of the day, it was a very difficult time, I would say, to start a business. And the courage that you had to just follow that through. I'm glad that you're a product person, but I didn't see a product person anytime that you fucking talked to me. I saw a person that was in corporate America that had a good value to give to people that was kind of cock-blocked by corporate America and the constraints that the world put on you. And you took that experience that you had and you went with all that passion into exactly what you knew how. And then the first thing you said to me is, I took another job, not for revenue, to further my education. Like, goddamn, I just want to give you a high five right now. I wish I wasn't 4,000 kilometers away from you, because that story in itself is impressive. So talk to me just a little bit about, and I guess we'll get into that. I guess we'll get into that.
Yeah,
a little
no, I
bit
think we
later
should.
on.
You really hit the nail on the head there, Shaun. Like, I couldn't have said it better myself. Like, cap culture was one of the best things that happened to me, because not only did it teach me some of the different modalities about business and how to structure that, but it opened up the doors to doing something that I absolutely love and I'm so passionate about, and kind of finding that perfect representation of how I can give back to the world.
And who you are too, I think. Do you know what I mean? I not to interrupt you there, but I think that to me, that of what you were trying to sell, there was a product in between you and that person. And I think really like what resonated me with you was you. And like, I was never going to stop you on that, because you have to figure this out. But like, it was almost a disconnect from like the source energy, so to speak. It's like, here's I am, buy my hat.
Exactly.
It's just like, no, dude, just step in front of the fucking hat and you got this, man.
Exactly.
Go ahead, continue on.
It's
on,
kind of
man.
hysterical. So the original mission of cap culture, allowing people to live a life that they love, is this still the same mission
It's
that
the
I
same
always have
mission
a
that the business
person?
is.
It is the mission that I've had. It's the mission that I've had since the near-death experience that I suffered, back in 2016. And I don't think that's going to change ever. After your, skydiving incident, when you're facing such pain and you turn that into purpose, like a new mission is kind of born within you. I think the irony there is hysterical, because you're right. There was a lot of mentors that I ended up working with that looked at cap culture as a functional business, and they're like, I don't see the connection here. What's going on? What's going on? But
you had the ability to take a chance on yourself and to try this. And the fact that like you did that, I knew you were going to figure it out, at the end of the day, because I can't even tell you how many businesses didn't make sense from my A to B, but kind of turned here. And the same thing I first said about the product business. I am not against a product business. I've got colleagues that make over 100 million annually in product businesses that they own, and they kill it. It's just a different animal. And for me,
Yep.
Alex, you know me super well. I've said it enough on this podcast. That wasn't my end game goal. And the difference for me and my product is, realistically, what I want to tell everybody, if it's not that little CBD tincture that I can't sell everywhere, but when it was microgreens, my real passion is eat food, don't use this. This is good if you can't get the food, but like that was the disconnect for me too. It's like, I want you to eat better and then use my product if you can't find the food, but really I want you to fucking eat better. and some of the folks that are marketing, like, you can't say that kind of thing. I'm like, yes, I can. And that just resonated with me about, okay, I need to be in a certain kind of business. And again, none of those were failures. All those led me to a conclusion. But I just think it's interesting how if you have the courage to follow your desires or your passions will help the universe unfold in front of you and present you the pathway forward. So even though the business name's different, it sounds like it's a lot more aligned with who you are and what that mission was.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Perfect. So talk to me a little bit about, and all this has been there, but like, What is the difference from surviving to thriving? Because, and I think that you're in those transitions right now, probably going through them at some at the same time. But like, what does that look like from you? And can you give any examples of when you've been both, maybe?
Yeah, sure. After starting Cap Culture and going through so much trial and error and then getting a new corporate career just to learn more skills, I always look back on psychology, right? And I think
Yep.
mindset is the most important skill that you can have in business, and it's a skill that's constantly overlooked. And when you look at survival mode, probably 80% of people that are walking around the world today are in a state of fight or flight. They're in a state of
I think
passion.
it's even
Of
higher, but I'm with you.
It's
I'm
really,
with you,
really
man.
high, man. There's so many people that are walking on just in a state of fear and in a state of anxiety because they're unable to really break through that mental barrier that's holding them back in a state of survival. And I'm not just talking about a financial situation. I'm not talking about a mental health situation, but I'm looking at like an old model of Maslow. Like let's look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a moment. And I think that's something that can completely be updated based on the times. So this is an idea for you. How about we create something that's called the modern Maslow? And when you're looking at all the different boxes that trap you in a state of survival mode, you're looking at your financial health, your career health, your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, the health of your relationships, your clarity, your life vision. There's a few different categories in there. And I think nowadays we have a better understanding of what actually makes a complete person go from that state of survival and into a state of creation or a state of thriving. Um,
And this will probably resonate with you too, but I would argue that, Alex, I think that number is probably closer to 99% of the people are in fight or flight mode. 87% of American citizens, this is a statistic from last week, cannot afford an emergency over $3,000 in a month. So I would say that specifically where the economy is, where the world's going, people are definitely in that state. And I think a lot of people, especially and again, I'm going to use a lot of terminology that you and I probably haven't talked before that you're aware of, but dude, our culture is toxic. And I look, I love America more than any place I've ever been. I'm an American citizen. I can't wait to get back. I wish I could gift every one of my friends, and not a week, not 10 days, not a month, a couple months out of that system to live in a different place. Like the things that I've just learned from being in Europe, Alex, that like just subtly, friendships are way different here. They're way more meaningful. You would make, especially a guy like you would make thousands of friends within your first couple months that actually meant something that people didn't care about. My pushback to any, not even pushback, but I think a lot of what's leading us there, and it's great for what you're doing. Our society is so fucking distracted today, and it's everyone's in survival mode because times are tough too. So how do we pull them out of that survival mode when? Because I think 10 years ago, Alex, you're right. I think most of it was a distraction, and I don't think the world is as bad. And I do believe the world's in abundance, but we are going through some massive transitions globally. Supply chains have already changed. They're not coming back. Some really interesting information coming out on August 22nd that's not talked about in the U.S. news too much. We'll leave that for some surprises for everywhere else. But like, how did you do it for yourself, and then how are you kind of identifying that in other people? Because I think you first have to be able to see it in yourself and fix it in yourself to be able to help others. Is that?
Absolutely. That's completely accurate. I think such a wise saying is one of the best ways to make the biggest impact on the world is to first make the biggest impact on yourself. Because
Yeah.
if you're not able to allow yourself to align, the world is not going to be a better place. I want to tell a quick story called The Rainmaker. So there's this Eastern village. And it's a very, very old village, and there's a Westerner, we call him an American, who's visiting this village. And the village is suffering a very, very intense drought. And during this drought, the Westerner talks to the tribespeople and the councils of the village. And he's like, well, what are you guys going to do about this drought? Are you going to dig deeper wells? Are you going to build a dam into the river? What are you going to do about this drought? And all the tribespeople of the village, they look at the Westerner and they go, well, we called the Rainmaker. The Westerner is thinking to himself, he goes, well, who the hell's the Rainmaker? Why are you calling this guy? There are scientific models and there's things that we can do that work that I'm familiar with that are a simple fix to this problem. Why are you calling the Rainmaker? Who the hell is this guy? Sure enough, this old man shows up for a neighboring village. He doesn't talk to anybody in the town. He sits in a tent for 3 days, doesn't say a word. And during these 3 days, the drought continues, and the Westerner's thinking to himself, why don't we dig a well, guys? What are we doing? And everyone's like, no, patience. It's fine. It's all going to be fine. Sure enough, on the third day, it starts raining. And I mean pouring. And the Rainmaker walks out of his tent, and the Westerner goes over to him, and he's like, I got to meet this guy. And he goes up to the Rainmaker, and he says, How did you make it rain? What did you do? And the rainmaker looks at him and he says, when I got to this land, I was out of order, so the land was out of order. And when I got myself back in order, the land got itself back in order. And I think it's such a wonderful thing to talk about when you're looking at a state of survival mode because there's so much buzz, Shaun, and there's so much noise around us in the world that we live in. And it's important just to kind of close your eyes sometimes and to realize what's actually important for you. Getting that
I
clarity
love
within
it.
yourself is one of the best things that you can possibly do. I think we're all so blocked by scrolling on social media, by reading the news, by hearing our friends' opinions. And there's such a variance of opinions that are happening now. And to understand that emotions come and emotions are going to pass. And sometimes you got to close your eyes and get clear on what's important to you and put your stake in the ground. Because if you're listening to, let's say, four different mindset podcasts and they all have completely different views, but you like each one equally, you're going to be a conflicted person. And I think it's finding the information that is valuable to you and how you can integrate in that in your life. And if you see a difference immediately, stick to that. It's relatively simple.
It's yeah, it is. It really is. And I love this too, man, because I don't want to say this and come off like a complete narcissist, but you're sounding quite a bit different than 2 years ago when I talked to you too. You've done a lot of growth. Like I can tell you've done a lot of growth, a lot of mental growth as well. And I think you've maybe settled in a little bit and your energy even seems a little bit calmer. Alex, like I really can tell that you've grown a lot there. And I agree. I've got nothing to really comment on that. I agree with everything you said. I think a lot of times we create the chaos to try to have some kind of formation of control over things that there is no control over. And I think whether your body's sick or just sitting and kind of accepting some things is a good way to be and observing. If I could give anything to any random person I met, and the biggest gift back I could give is to just sit and observe a lot more, observe yourself. One of the biggest changes in my life that I've had specifically, and I know you've been through injuries, but observing myself as a human for multiple weeks. And I mean, looking at myself almost abstract outside of my body for 7 days and just watching my own behaviors, that will change your life forever. Just watch yourself as a human, observing your own habits, obviously in your body, but I think it just really helps with that stepping outside and kind of looking back in. So I understand, I understand what thriving and surviving looks like to you. And I think that, my God, if we could get everyone to be balanced there. What is the largest risk you've taken in your life? And maybe you haven't even taken it yet, but what's the largest risk today?
Um, hmm. It's a good question, man. So a couple of weeks ago, we had our executive team in town from London, and our business for my day job just hasn't been doing as well as we could do. So they just went through a period of layoffs. They just laid off 40 people, and their business model just seems a little more ancient to me than keeping up with the current times. So the CEO is in town, the COO, the president of the company, and we're all sitting in a boardroom together, and they're answering all of our questions in the most generic way possible. And for me, that doesn't sit well. That doesn't sit right. I'm not going to sit there when somebody is completely beating around the bush and they're an owner of a company and they're providing people to live their life. Yeah, so I stood up and I talked for about 15 minutes and I didn't use a single buzzword like high level or profit margin, or I spoke very plain and clearly about different solutions that we can bring to the table to turn the business profits around. And my heart was beating out of my chest on it, Shaun, I'm not going to lie. And I feel like it's conversations that I've had with you and some of the motivations with people like yourself who have really motivated me to be the person that I am today that brought that out of me. And while I'm talking about this, I'm thinking in my head, I'm either going to get fired right now or this is going to
Are you
be,
going to get promoted? Or
or
you're going to get
promoted.
promoted?
And,
Yeah, that's the way to live.
and it was a really, really big risk. Sure, I could have sat there and I could have kept quiet and I could have kept my head down and I could have kept doing my job. However, I decided to speak up and really bring some good points to the table. Sure enough, after I said that, the VP came right over to me and he's like, "Hey, let's go get lunch." And at lunch, he was like, really, really surprised and grateful for what you said today. You know, you hit the nail on the head, and it's people like you that we need in this company to really turn the ship around.
You got to use your voice when you realize, especially in a corporate setting. I love business because it almost identifies how many people are just getting by. And I mean, like 85 to 90% of the people do not want attention in the world. I mean, that's a psychological statistic. So it's like, I just don't want this attention on me. I don't want to do bad. All right. I don't want that bad attention, but I don't want to do so great. And Alex, I appreciate that compliment you gave me, but what I think really gave you that confidence was the courage of what you've done with your business and now proving yourself. Like those, even though you didn't have your numerical KPI, you had these other lofty goals that you hit in 6 months, and you've got another business going now. So I think once you've taken a chance on yourself and you've proven that to yourself, just like when you go to the gym the first time and you've never squatted, and you're like, I'm going to do my body weight today. Then you go back and you do like 20 kilos, and you're like, oh shit, and then the next, and you just keep adding on. Once you've kind of done that, it's very hard because a lot of us are already having conversations with ourselves, right? All day, every day. But a lot of times this voice in our head is telling us what not to do and to try to keep us controlled and in this box. And I think once you eradicate that ego a little bit and understand that that ego is evolved, but you don't have to that same voice that keeps you safe is the same voice that when you look over the edge is like, jump. You're not going to but you know what I mean? It's the same thing of when you get in there. And I think once you've toiled with that a little bit and you've wrestled with that in your mind, you're like, no, this again, this conversation now, not my business, but this conversation that I'm in front of, I have boundaries of who I am as a species and an individual, and this doesn't resonate with me. So no one else is going to speak. I'm going to speak. And then what you will find with that, Alex, is what we first said. Those are what I call filters. And what I mean by that filter is that sounds like your vice president is a great person to be around, and he appreciated that. The other people that are catty and insecure and will project anger at that, that's also a filter to be aware of, you know? So I think no matter how that goes, and I love it, you're either going to get promoted or fired. Both are probably great outcomes, and it doesn't really matter as long as you are, connected to your. We're not talking about yelling out in a meeting for no reason, but if you're actually trying to help, if you're connected to your A to B, and if you see something that doesn't resonate, speak. Because the number one thing I think is wrong with America today, for as much as we try to influence each other, I would argue that we are the most people-appeasing, cunty, pussy culture I've ever seen at anywhere I've been. And this is for New Yorkers too. You want to have a real conversation. If there's more than two people involved, I would argue that no one in America has a real conversation if there are more than two people present these days. And I thought that was different, Alex, but dude, come to me in Romania for 3 months. Go to Amsterdam for a weekend. Talk to the Dutch. See how the Dutch just talk. Like this bullshit that we do to one another in America, we have just gone in so often appeasing, and I'm proud because I think not only this is why authentic people are scaling right now. When you speak your truth, because there's so much bullshit in our system. And going back to the influencers, I love influencing. I love content. But my God, there's so much bad content out there. And to your point, no one's really connected to their A to B. And that's what drives me crazy. It's like I'm doing this podcast not to try to monetize at all. Like this is a huge reverse ATM for us. But the people I'm meeting, the conversations I have, and some of the audiences throw me into, it's like, it's just so resonates with who I am. And it's scaling like this because it's authentic conversation. So
Yeah.
I'm just proud of you. I'm
Yeah,
proud of
man.
you for that.
Yeah, I want to elaborate on that briefly. I can tell your heart's in it, and some of the things that you said about this podcast is, hey, let's keep it as real as we possibly can to introduce people to the real life, what actually happens in life and in these stories. And there's so much information that's being circulated in the world right now. And getting back to your point, how much of that information is actually providing people with value? I'm not saying sit in a boardroom and speak up and say something that is going to be out of line and disrespectful, but I'm saying if you have the courage and the passion and the respect to be able to address people and come from a place of value to try and prove a point and make the world a better place, then by all means, go for it. And that's one
Use your
thing that
voice.
I'm 100%. And you're right, when you're with more than two people in America and you're having a conversation, I can't do it anymore personally. There's very few people that I really like keeping in my circle now.
It's scary to me, Alex. And like, you'll see the one with Jay and I coming back out. And I'm resonating with you, man. It's, I think the political conversation in our country has gotten too loud, but my argument to that, and at least my conversations to all my European colleagues, I think if I had to box all this up, there is a serious lack of civic duty in American culture. And then you look back to when we stopped teaching civics, and it was, a little bit before my generation. I think I had it my freshman year, and it was done by then. So I graduated high school in 2000. So we're going on now 3 generations out of there that have never been educated on how our process works. Most of my colleagues that I respect the most, that I think could battle this back, think that we should just run and hide. And I just think it's like one of these things. I don't want to be involved in politics, but I think the conversation has been it's drug us to here now, right? And if you really look at what's happening, a lot of the conversations in our society aren't really what's happening, but they're conversations that are interjected. So to your point, it keeps the chaos fighting. It's like, what are the most inflammatory things we could throw together? run that one kind of through, and that's where our society is. It's a little bit, but it's interesting because no matter how much this goes on, there's still people that can kind of find their best part of themselves, and being able to take a chance on themselves. And I still would resonate that plays out the best. But talk to me about this, Alex. And like, so I know you've been through a lot. I know you're still growing and still crushing the business there and still getting your next thing going. But how does one, so not even you and I, so I guess how do you show up as your best version of yourself every day? But how does the average person do? Because I do feel this a little bit before I give it over to you, Alex. Like, I was fortunate that I took a chance on myself, and it played out in the first 3 months. And I mean, this is going back to when I first had my first business, but that set such a rock rolling downhill for me that, just like you standing up in the in the boardroom meeting, that never allowed me to stop. Doesn't mean everything was successful, but I don't think, I didn't have kids. I wasn't trying to start this business with responsible for someone else and other things. So like, how does the average person with 2 kids, maybe a meaningful or a meaningless job, but it's paying the bills, how do they show up as their best version of themselves? And maybe it's not even about starting a business, but like, how do they just get out of kind of the rat race and just feel better about who they are tomorrow, if they could?
Sure, absolutely. I think the number one thing that anybody can do is first start from a place of clarity, looking yourself in the mirror and actually understanding what you want and defining what that looks like. From there, after we know what we want, we can actually define a set of lists and habits and routines that are going to give us a section to go from point A to point B. I think one of the biggest issues of people living from a state of fight or flight and stress and anxiety is because a lot of people don't know what they actually want.
Oh
So
yeah.
getting really, really clear, so getting really, really clear on understanding this is what I want is the first fundamental root, most important thing you can do. And then from there, there's certain tools, like metacognition is basically your awareness or understanding of your consciousness and the different patterns and routines that you're living by. And when you start to apply principles of metacognition and understanding where you are, you start to iron out a better mindset of how you can then develop the best patterns, habits, and routines to get yourself from point A to point B. And I think it's really, really simple, Shaun. For me personally, from whenever what I think, what I say, and what I do, when those are in alignment, I know I'm being my best self. When I'm thinking and what I'm saying and what I'm doing, when those are in alignment, I am fully present all the time. I know exactly what I want. I'm coming from a place of clarity and I'm firing in all cylinders. I don't know how many people you know, but how often do you feel that on a daily basis?
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, you don't want me to answer that, but I've also
Yeah,
lived a lot of a different life. I
sure.
would argue that most people never experience it, but I also would say, let me even back up to this, because I think you've discovered this. How does one find out what they're really passionate about? How does one really find out what the A to B looks like if they don't know? Because I mean, I almost don't want to get off this conversation with the same thing, like trigger words of like, A to B, found your passion. Because I think that in itself, like, because I can kind of comment on some of those, but I'm just curious about your opinions as well. Because
Yeah, I've led a couple workshops on this. So there's a book that I absolutely love. It's called The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler. And in that, he talks about how you can explore your different curiosities and essentially make a big flow chart and find where those intersect and problems that you could solve to find what you're passionate about. I mean, you can call it the Ikigai kind of Japanese model, but let's forget about all that for a second. From a rudimentary standpoint, to find out what you're passionate about, if you had a limited amount of time and money wasn't a thing, it's such a simple question, but what the hell would you do? Seriously. And when you answer that question truthfully and honestly, then you start to connect bridges of, oh my gosh, I can actually live authentically and follow this passion and I can get paid for it. And then the wheels start to turn. And that was the biggest difference for me from going from a physical product to something that is service based, because physical products, they locked me down to a single location. They locked me down to spending more time with boxes, making more of an impact on the environment. There was a lot of negatives there compared to having a service-based business, which then opened up the door for me to kind of create a complete model of how I can be my best self and also provide the most value to the world in the state of a business. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. It gave you a framework to have the conversation in, almost, for lack of a better term. Does that resonate back with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I think this is a lot of good information, man. And I'm just leaving this conversation so excited, number one, for you. And I'm glad that everything turned out the way I thought it was going to. And it sounds like you've really done a lot of further self-development over the last couple of years and really just diving in. So so right now, I guess, like, so I don't want to say this wrong. Cap culture is still going on, mostly B2B. How can people find out about you though? In this, is the fitness business, is this launched yet? Is this something that people can find out about, or like leave my guests, leave your like fans with something to hang on to? Like, how can they find more information out about this? Because I think this conversation was good, and I want to give people a way to stay in contact with you or to find this fitness program once you release it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The best way to stay in touch with me is to go to soulsparker.com. So soulspark and then the letter R.com. From there, you can check out what we're up to. There's a lot of updates on the page. I put out a newsletter every single Monday, and it's content of true value. So feel free to subscribe to that. And yeah, man, it's been so good to see you and to see what you're up to. And you were such a big spark that influenced me to start living a life that's more in alignment of who I am as a person, Shaun. So thank you for having me on, brother.
Oh, we'll keep talking, man, too. It's been a pleasure to have you back, Alex. And I love having someone that, again, like not really an official, entrepreneur student, nothing that we really, I mean, just from knowing each other in the gym and really just wanting to see you push through there. And I just love those first conversations. I tell my fiance all the time, like, you'll meet Alex eventually. Like, all I really did for the first 3 weeks, and I'll say, Alex, is just talk shit to him to encourage him to do this. I'm like, you keep coming down with your plan. I'm like, fuck your plan, just go start it. And then like the one day you came back down and you did. And I'm like, and I just love that too, man, because I think you're someone that's seen me long enough to where you can prod with love. And I think if I really had to quantify what I'm saying, like I love our culture. I love America, man. I miss it. What scares me the most is we're just not being real with each other. And that's not love. Like appeasing people and not being good to your friends isn't real. You see your friend making bad decisions. And I love, like, there's a difference between discrimination. Like, discrimination's bad, but some discrimination between bad habits is good, and I think this is where it's getting cloudy. Tolerance is good, but if we as individuals tolerate everything that's done to us, it's not good. And I think as much good is going in the world right now in the growth, like if we go back to Maslow, there's a lot of overlap. And I think a lot of people are getting that conversation cluttered because we're so busy, and I think what I see personally is a lot of people getting paralyzed by fear right now. I've got more colleagues than I've ever had that are unemployed. I've got more people that are kind of struggling. But on the other end, I also have more people than I've ever talked to that are thriving. And I think we're going into some times that are going to be a little bit transitional. And if folks aren't really good about, you and I we kind of have those foundations. I think every guest I've had on here has been through some kind of failure. They've been through some kind of success, but something in their life has given them a discipline. So they are not going to go like this where the world's going like this, And I think right now, if you don't stand for anything, you're going to stand for fucking everything. And that is a dangerous time to be involved. So for the folks that are out there, we're going to drop all of Alex's socials down there. He's a man of inspiration, someone I definitely can't wait to get back to in person. But Alex, thank you so much for being here, man. It's a good convo. I can't wait to have you back on. And Taking Chances, episode number 11. We're already here, guys. Alex Englehart, thank you so much. We'll chat again, guys.
It's been an honor, Shaun.